I'm not easily swayed, and I feel like generally I like most things, so it's fine.
I hate
It's a
everything.
good way to be.
Also a good way to be. Nothing wrong with hating everything.
I enjoy it.
Whatever it takes.
Look, as long as you're equal opportunity, that's the important thing.
Yeah.
I do my very best.
Yeah. Don't listen to these fools. The episode's great.
Yay! Hey.
Well, speaking of crappy podcasts without a plan, and
Let's do it.
let's do it, exactly.
Let's get this fight started.
I'm not passionate enough to fight, but maybe Michael will be.
I don't have the energy.
Hello and welcome to Vassals of Kingsgrave. In today's episode, we are going to be reviewing Watchmen series from HBO, specifically episodes 4 through 9, but we'll be discussing, I guess, the series in its entirety. My name is Thomas. I'm FTWard on the podcast of Ice and Fire forums, and today I am joined by Adam.
Hey, this is Adam Drownedsnow, also known as Dr. Something or Other.
Matt.
Hey, Blue Armor on the forums.
Michael.
Hey, I'm Michael Mordion on the forums.
And I'm also joined by Jock.
Hello, Jock here on the forums.
Bina could not make it for this recording. We have additional bonus podcast at the end with Bina. Why don't we start with Jock, since he was not on our first podcast. Jock, why don't you give us your general feelings on the show, the source material, your experience with the movie, and Alan Moore, Damon Lindelof, anything you would like to say, and then the rest of us will kind of give our revised ratings for the rest of the series, and then we'll just get into a general discussion.
I think I'd give a 4 out of 5. The whole production was very well done. There's a lot of good lighting. I'm a bit disappointed with how it strayed from the sort of graphic novel in terms of characters' philosophies and how they are pretty loyal to philosophical concepts, with Scarlet Witch no longer being as much of a consequentialist as she is in the novel, and then Dr. Manhattan not being as deterministic. Also not quite sure why Angela's in that relationship. Doesn't really sort of buy it. I can kind of get from Dr. Manhattan because he doesn't really have that sort of free will thing, so I guess it sort of happens.
He meant Silk Spectre.
I assume. No, I think those are all really good points myself. I'll just jump in, I guess. I feel like places where the show in the original 3 episodes I thought was building out its own universe, but kind of tended to backfill some information, in the P2P stuff, and then in the show proper, that I felt were a disservice to the original and kind of didn't move what I thought the story was going to be forward in an interesting way, at least. How about you guys? How did you feel about where you felt from 4 to 9 as opposed to where you were from 1 to 3?
I'm certainly down from where I was from 1 to 3. 4 to 9, I don't know, somewhere in the vicinity of 2, probably. And most of that is resting on the Hooded Justice episode, which I thought was a good episode in its own right. I'm not particularly wild about the flashback framing, but just the Hooded Justice episode all by itself, I thought was a really enjoyable hour or so of television. Everything else, I don't know. I'm sort of too many things to say all at once, and I'm not sure what to talk about. There were I had a lot of problems with a lot of different things, and I'll just leave it at that for the moment.
I'll go. I think I was a 4.5 maybe on the first 3 episodes when we did this. And I'll say, like, overall for the season, I'm still probably at a good 4. So this last batch of episodes would maybe be like a 3.75 or something. The Hood Justice episode was good. I actually liked the God Walks into Abar episode. I get what they were trying to do. It wasn't really, some of that stuff is not how I would have chosen things to go, but like I think it was competently done. And there were certain, I don't, the whole season's supposed to be about race, even though like some bits definitely feel very heavy-handed. I think it's maybe supposed to. That's not necessarily the best person to like to be analyzing that. I don't know. I do think there are some significant things that they threw in there, like when she's going through her past, talking about like she picks the movie because the character looks like her, you know, and it just happens to be this like really violent, you know, blaxploitation film. And I get they didn't want to go like super big in the ending. There's definitely some disappointment in the ending, more in just how it frames the entire season.
I think they wanted to hit that representation thing. And I appreciate that, but I don't know. I liked that actress quite a bit. I liked, as Michael did, like the Hooded Justice episode. I liked seeing Vietnam. I thought that was interesting. But somewhere along the line, for me, so much flashback just kind of killed any forward momentum in 2019, and we had characters like Looking Glass and like Lori that I thought in the back half
just dropped off,
just had nothing to do.
Pattern, very dangerous place, and we just left them there for
episodes and episodes, and it just, I didn't feel like it served the 2019 story at all.
Yeah, I think Lori feels like when younger Senator Keene is coming in being like, I just couldn't resist bringing you in to, you know, watch this happen. I feel like that was kind of them talking to the audience too. It's like, well, we had, you know, Dr. Manhattan was going to show up, so we kind of had to have her. I don't like the particular way that her character went. I don't think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I like the character. I just don't like. I like the person she was playing on the show, and put it that way. And the actor, everyone did a great job on the show, but I feel like that's not maybe the way I would see the Silk Spectre going.
Yeah, why don't we let Matt give his point of view first, and then maybe we'll talk about some of those characters specifically. I don't want to get too deep into characters and stuff before we give Matt a chance to tell us how we're wrong.
I mean, there's some points I can like acquiesce on, but I mean, I love this show through and through. You know, it's one of my favorites of the year. You know, it's impossible to remember all the different shows that came out this year as to what ranks at the very top, but it's one of my favorites of the year. I will say that the finale episode was not my favorite of the season. I think kind of the standout episodes for me are 3, 6, and 8, which is Lori's episode, Hooded Justice episode, and then God Walks into A-Bar were kind of my 3 favorites. And so, yeah, I think a very valid criticism is that kind of the very end of the story was kind of framed as a big convergence of all the characters, and there weren't enough things for all the characters involved in the convergence to do. And so there just wasn't as many like quote unquote badass moments as you would hope for in such a thing. Actually my favorite like comic booky moment was at the end of episode 8 with Manhattan and Angela like fighting off all the 7th Cavalry guys, and we kind of didn't get a similar type thing in the finale. I thought there were a lot of kind of good endings in the finale between Angela, Dr. Manhattan, Adrian, and Lady True, but yeah, Looking Glass and Lori kind of got put on the back burner, didn't have enough involvement, and there, there's a few unanswered questions. Where's Lube Man? Like, how come he couldn't make an appearance or something like that? So I will say that, but overall there was plenty I enjoyed about the finale of Senator Keene getting liquefied and all the other 7th Cavalry people just getting dusted, and the squid thing coming through, and the quiet scene kind of between Angela and Hooded Justice was very good.
Yeah, I like why Lube Man. I don't understand why Lube Man is in it at all, I guess.
Yeah.
If that's all they're going to have, I mean.
Someone suggested that he's like supposed to be their version of Hooded Justice from the original comic, where like he's very mysterious, he kind of pops in and out, but you have no idea who he is, and like the story just doesn't get answered. Like, I was just like, well, he only showed up once.
Well, Hooded Justice actually did stuff. I mean, like Lube Man
ran away.
Yeah.
I was
Keeps on
looking for a
people
shot
and
of like
that's
Lube Man to like press a button or do something critical in the last episode.
Right,
and, like,
yeah,
disappear,
exactly.
You never see him again, and I'm like, okay, that paid off. That works. He's Lube Man.
Yeah, so like, that's definitely like a dangling thread that was just so unnecessary. And I am a little disappointed that we didn't get, Looking Glasses. I'm not trapped in here with you. You're trapped in here with me moment. Like I wanted to see him fuck up those 7K people like on his home turf, and they just never showed it, which is disappointing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like 9 episodes they should have maybe made it 10 or 12 or something. I feel like there was more story here that things got rushed. I don't know, with all the...
Yeah, I agree.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure whether I'd say it got rushed or they just like they were adding like little things that they didn't really have anything to do with and they just thought were interesting. Like I think they thought it was interesting to have presumably
in a Lindelof show
be Lube Man. And it's just sort of like, but why?
Yeah.
Right, but
I don't think they had anything to do with him, right? Like, if it's not like the writer's room, I don't think. I mean, obviously, I don't have a ton of respect for them at this point, but it's not like that writer's room. I feel like had a lot to do with PD, and they were like, oh
Shots
god,
fired.
if only we could film all this great stuff we have for Lube Man. They didn't have anything to do with Lube Man, right? Like I don't think that they did, right?
Yeah, I don't want to make it all about Lube Man, but I think he is emblematic of other issues, I guess. And like I said, to me, I would have liked to spend more time in certain places with certain characters, and for sure, even in 2019, I felt like ultimately, like I don't understand 7th Cavalry. I don't understand. Would the Ku Klux Klan sue them if they just made them the Ku Klux Klan? I don't understand.
Can I get like a straw poll here? Like, the 7th Cavalry just kind of sucked and was boring.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
like, I don't understand Cyclops, 7th Cavalry, Ku Klux Klan. I guess I don't get why we couldn't just have these guys as the Ku Klux Klan and.
Well, especially because they swapped them out at the end. I mean, it felt like a cop out almost. I don't know. I get like Lady True had to be something, and it makes sense. I didn't like them like appropriating the the Rorschach masks, obviously, but we're not supposed to like that. I mean, I think it's supposed to mirror like in the real world, bad organizations try to take stuff and make it theirs, and it's whether or not we let them. They can
have Nazis. We want to keep the rest of this.
Yeah, no, but I mean, like the OK symbol. Like, like the people are like, well, the OK, like, and they did that in this, where it's like they put it on their head and that's Cyclops.
Yeah.
But like, apparently, if you do that with another thing in your hand, that means white power. So when people do the OK symbol, just like because people have always done that like my whole life, and they're like, oh look, Kanye flashed that. Is he a secret white supremacist? And I'm like, I think he's just saying OK, like.
Yeah, I didn't get those layers. One of the things that did bug me about the Hooded Justice episode is, I think I said this in the original podcast, that in my mind, Watchmen's universe, and maybe I'm just wrong, Watchmen's universe and our universe are exactly the same up until the point that Hooded Justice puts on his hood. And here we have like this ongoing Cyclops mind control in movie theaters subplot that exists prior to Hooded Justice's inception or origin. And to me, like I said, I guess it's maybe I'm just wrong, or this is just divergent from the comic book, but to me the universe was exactly the same until that one moment where Hooded Justice becomes a mass vigilante that kind of propels the universe in a different direction.
I mean, definitely this isn't really, I guess, a direct
mind control stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a weird... I don't know. It's kind of... Mind control is a lot like time travel. To me, like, if you're gonna make a show about mind control, then the show has to be about mind control. Like, it's too cheap and too impossible to grapple with if that's not what the show is about.
Yeah.
And in the same way
It seemed
that
like it was solely used to kill Judd. I mean,
Yeah.
Exactly,
it just removes
right? I mean,
agency. It's just,
Yeah.
I can't stand it as a story device, like you said.
Was anyone
unless-
expecting the pills to be like superhero pills that like made her like Hulk out or something? And I was like, oh, maybe that's how he did it. Before we got the reveal that it was nostalgia.
I figured he was just a badass. I mean, as soon as we saw that he could stand, I was like, well, fuck it. He's fucking cool. Why not, right? He's the first superhero. Like, the guy's just fucking awesome.
And I think, I don't know where I read this, but like the Cyclops thing is apparently like a white power, like a Ku Klux Klan thing, way
it's a
back in
real
the
thing?
day. So in like, what movie was it? Was it like Big Fish or something where like the Cyclops is part of the Klan or something? That's because like the Cyclops thing was part of their like mythology like a long time ago. It's something I briefly read. I didn't look at it too much, but I know, I'm sure some of you guys know the story of like the Superman radio series where the guy he went undercover with the Klan to try to like get he got all of their secret handshakes and their codes, and he was putting them into the radio series every week, like the real stuff they were doing, and making fun of it and having Superman beat them up. And all the Klan members were like, my kids think I'm ridiculous, and like it was a big part of what helped the Klan fall apart, because people were like, I can't be a part of this shit. This is ridiculous. It kind of felt like, something along those lines of like maybe something that was kind of part of their thing, but like eventually got weeded out in our world. But that wouldn't have happened obviously around the time Hood of Justice exists. So maybe there could have been like the Cyclops branch of the Ku Klux Klan. I don't know. I didn't find anything that pointed that out in history, but
I guess I was holding on hope that Judd was not a bad guy until way past the point where everyone else had
same
agreed that he was a bad guy, and in the end it turns out he's a really bad guy, because he's
a really bad guy, but also like we sort of like don't get any kind of wrap up for him, right?
Yeah.
Like he died in the first episode, and he died with us thinking he was a good guy, and then it's several episodes later that we're sort of like, oh, he's definitely a shitbag.
Right. Well, even in the A-Bar episode where she's like, wait, I caused this? Like, you didn't know he was part of the Cyclops thing? Like, it sounded like she was like, shit, maybe he was okay. Maybe he wasn't in on it. And then like later on we get like his wife is like, oh, by the way, I have
a trap
I have a murder door.
Yeah, and the only reason we actually befriended the A-Bars is because we knew that Cal was Dr. Manhattan, so we were cultivating a relationship with. So like I said, maybe that's on me that I was holding odds that he was a good person till way past all evidence, but I found that.
I thought maybe he would have been a double agent or something, and they got it wrong, but nope.
Yeah. When we left off in 3, I guess, right, the next episode was kind of the Lady True episode. So I'm curious what you guys thought as Lady True. I think we went into that episode thinking she was going to be the big bad, quote unquote, for this season, and in many ways she did turn out to be that. What did you guys think of Lady True and kind of where we went on her arc from 4 on?
I feel like we needed more time with her, but I liked her character. I liked her bitterness towards Old Man Veidt, and how this kind of all shaped where she like sends a fucking rocket ship and then just keeps him as a statue for who knows how long. That was amazing.
Fun.
What was the impetus of her mother's hatred for Adrian?
I was gonna say it's another thing that we have like no explanation for, right?
So
like, her mother stole the.
That's like the big thing that falls apart for me, is that like I assume he has these people working at his Antarctica base. He probably has all the scientists and stuff, but doesn't he kill all of them off or something?
She just walks out of Antarctica, I guess.
But
no, I think he kills everyone, I believe.
I suppose. I mean,
maybe because they look like they were just hired help, and maybe I thought like, well, they're all Asian, so that way when he's like recording this video, they won't know what's going on when he's talking in English. Like that's the way someone like him would think. And that like maybe they don't have any sort of intelligence, on his level.
He gives them direction in English, though, right? He gives them like, let's run it. He's like, someone coughs. He's like, cut. Let's run it again, or something like that. And
because couldn't she just leave? Like she was like so pissed off at him. She's like, screw you, I'm gonna have your baby. Was she expecting to get money?
I mean, given her whole completely Tiger Mom on steroids thing, I mean, I assumed that she took this Steven because he was the smartest man in the world or whatever, right? Do we not think that? That's what I thought.
I think that. I just don't know where the animosity came from, I guess. I could see her being pissed with America or pissed with Dr. Manhattan or the comedian or something, but I'm not sure why Adrian in particular was the target of her.
I don't know either.
He's just a douche.
And the same with Lady True herself, right? I mean, like, she showed up, asked him for whatever it was, $46 billion, and
he's like, no.
Right, and I was just like, I mean, like, that also seems like a relatively reasonable response given, like, your introduction, but I don't know.
But he was also like, I'm never going to acknowledge you, fuck you, so then I can see her being kind of having issues before that and then being pissed off afterwards.
Yeah,
I guess.
But she also had enough money to launch fucking satellites to Jupiter. Like,
well, she had to earn all that, though, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. She had a successful company without him, and then eventually she eats his company up, right?
Yeah, she had already launched satellites.
Yeah, when she was there, she's like, "Yeah, I've got in 5 years, this satellite's going to be there."
Yeah, right.
So,
right.
I think her overall thing with Adrian was just to show him that she could do better than he did in terms of, you know, quote unquote, saving the world.
Saving the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I don't understand why. I mean, like, I guess I don't know. I'm not adopted or whatever, and I don't have, you know, a father who was, you know, a superhero. But I don't understand why she's so. I mean, as far as we know, she had one 5-10 minute interaction with him. And that was the sum total of an interaction. I don't understand why he's so why he looms.
I think her mother must have raised her, though, right?
Oh, yeah, I suppose. Although we don't know why her mother felt that way.
Yeah, that's the way I took it, at least, that her mother raised her to kind of be obsessed with Adrian or whatever. But I more understand her motivation than her mother's motivation, which is lost to me, I guess.
Right. I mean, yes, they could have.
Why did Lady True buy the whole farm instead of just saying a spaceship is going to crash here and I want it? It's mine. Like, it's my spaceship.
They wanted to show us how she power moves the shit like Vite. How she shows up and is like, I've cloned this baby, bitch. Like, you're like, whoa.
How early did she clone the baby?
Well, exactly. If she knew it was going to land on the farm, then why didn't she just buy the farm weeks ago, right? Like, why? Or
maybe cloning's hard and it took a while to get a viable clone. I don't know.
Right, but why clone it at all, right? Like, I mean, like, why show up at the 11th hour being like, you have to sell me your house in the next 47 seconds?
Why not just knock them out and steal the ship?
Or have lawyers show up, you know, 6 weeks earlier and be like, hey, we're offering you, $8 million for your house. No, 10.
Right.
16.
Yeah, it seems like there was never an attempt before this.
Except for at the very last second where she might actually also, I mean, and again, I don't know what the legalities are, but like if it's your spaceship and it crashes on somebody else's land and you're like, no, it's my spaceship. Like, I assume that it's still yours.
Well, she didn't want questions. She didn't want anyone to know what was going on, obviously.
I mean, I guess, but yeah.
It is very weird.
Seemed like a good scene, but then I think looking back on it, it doesn't really hold up.
Scene when it aired, but,
okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was fun. I mean, I like it. It introduced.
It was fun.
How terrible she is. No, I agree. So there's a lot of things I feel like they did this season that did not make sense, and this is my main problem. Where like at no point, and this is the next question I'm going to ask, but at no point did Dr. Manhattan have to accept this fate, right? Like he can just zip over here, destroy that shit, zip over here, kill these people. He knows it's coming. He lets it happen. So they either needed, they needed to either say that he was just, I'm done with life, I'm tired, and he was wanting to pass his powers on, or wanting, and this just, he knew this was happening, so he let it happen. Or the other question is, they said this on the podcast that they wanted to express like just how boring and dull John is, and I'm like, I thought that it was like he became Dr. Manhattan and he just stopped caring about everything, like when Hooded Justice says that. Well, considering what he could do, he could have done more. You're right. And Lady True's like, well, I'm going to fix the atmosphere. But like, once you are at that level where like, you're like, oh, I see everything. The idea is that like, well, everything becomes insignificant to me. So like, for a while you can get him to go take over Vietnam, or you can get him to go do this or that, but he doesn't go through and like the simplest plan would be like, hey John, go take all the nukes and throw them into the sun. He never does that, right? Like, because he just at some point stops caring.
Quest for peace, right?
But literally, like, he's got the teleportation powers, so Veidt has to come up with this whole the squid and all that. So I mean, is it that John Osterman was always just this boring kind of weird dude who didn't give a shit because he was white and wasn't going to help people, or is it just that becoming Dr. Manhattan on that level kind of makes you stop caring eventually?
Well, I think he becomes Dr. Manhattan, and he sees his whole future, and he knows that he didn't destroy the nukes, so then he makes no effort to destroy the nukes because he knows.
The whole problem with Dr. Manhattan, is the...
Right.
I don't know. It's very hard to think about. Like, I don't know where to go with it.
Yeah.
Because it's always impossible to argue with. It's sort of like, well, why don't you do this? Because I didn't do it.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, but surely...
there's no accountability.
Something. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like when Angela asked him, why did you go to Vietnam then if you knew it was going to be a bad idea? And he's, well, you never done anything that you knew was going to be a bad idea before. I mean, it's kind of like both the beauty and the problem of his characters that...
Yeah, I think I do think it's one of those things where it's like we don't have to deal with it that much in the graphic novel or the movie because he's blinded by Adrian tachyon storm or whatever the hell, and so he gets to actually make decisions to some extent, and then the decisions that he's not making are at least things where it's like like his relationship with Laurie, where that's at least like understandable, right? Like even from a normal human, you could see a relationship falling apart and think to yourself, like, there's nothing I can do about this, right? Like, this is inevitable. This is going to happen.
I'm going to cry now.
Like,
it's the story of my life.
But just like, it's something where it's like, I could understand a normal person. Like, it's relatable, right? Like, oh, I could understand that, right? Like, you see a relationship falling apart and you can't fix it and you don't know what to do. And that makes sense. It's a lot harder when it's like, oh, a crazy terrorist group is going to kidnap you and kill you. Like, should you just let that happen? Like, I guess so.
Right.
I don't...
It feels like, to me, it feels like that the show, and, I think Lindelof sort of said this a little too, it feels like they're saying that, like, well, if Angela has the powers, like, someone else is going to do something different than Dr. Manhattan. I don't know. Like, obviously, like, the Keens thought as soon as they were going to fix everything as soon as they got the powers. Adrian, seems to not be that interested, but he seems to think, like, Lady True's just going to dominate everybody. I don't know. I don't know why they'd all just fuck off eventually.
Part of me thinks that as well, and another part, a bigger issue I have is just that I don't see Dr. Manhattan's powers as being transferable. Like, I sort of feel like it was a coincidental intersection of who John was and what happened to him, that he was in a position, they make a big deal of it, right? Like, him, the watchmaker's son.
The book sets it up.
Yeah,
right?
Who knows, who can remake himself in a way that other people, and in the beginning of this, in the beginning of the TV show, there's a throwaway news report about the Russians building an intrinsic field generator, and honestly, I'd be shocked at this point, right, that if no one has shoved someone in an intrinsic field generator to see what happens.
Yeah,
right?
let's just see what happens. It's fine.
Right, like, somebody must have done it by now. And so I don't think it's just I don't understand, like, John saying, Dr. Manhattan saying, oh yeah, I can transfer my power to people. I put them in an egg, or sometimes they suck them out of me with a laser, like, whatever. Like, I don't think his powers are transferable that way. Like, he's not Spider-Man, like he
look, I don't believe in gold kryptonite either, but that point existed at some point.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a reason I don't read comic books.
Yeah, there are certain things that this has been around for so long without any continuation that I think all of us have made our own sort of rules for this universe of, like, well, it seems to be set up that way. It doesn't make sense. Yeah. And then we get to something like this, and they're saying, well, we're taking it here. This is what's happening. This is what these characters are doing. And, like I said, some of it didn't really fit with me. So, that's not necessarily the show's fault, but I think you needed to find a way to make him being captured and killed and everything make a little more sense. Either he gives it up, or there's something that he can't avoid because of some reason. Like, he literally walked right into that and was like, goodbye.
For no reason. Right. I mean, like an absolute, like just a complete, like, no, I do this because this is what I do sort of thing. And it's very hard to deal with. It's very hard to make that into a story. Like, I don't know how you make that into a story. Like, if characters have literally no agency at all, then it is very difficult to care about them.
Agreed, and I think Moore handled it in a way that was more satisfying to me in the book than the show did, I guess. But
yeah, I mean, I think there are things you can do with Dr. Manhattan. Moore definitely did one of them. I think that there are probably a handful of other ideas, or like things that are perhaps similar to what Alan Moore did, but not exactly the same, that you can do. But I think that if you try to do if you make Dr. Manhattan the central figure, right? Because that's one thing, right? In Watchmen, like, Dr. Manhattan didn't actually do anything, right? He didn't accomplish anything, right? Like, he didn't change the outcome of anything. Adrian or Night Owl or Laurie could have killed Rorschach just as easily, right? Like,
yeah, he served more as a device to tell us, like, we have these electric cars, and we have this, like, Vietnam is, all this stuff is different in this world because of this guy, but we're taking him out of the game. They've removed him from the board, like.
And he removes himself to a certain extent, right? Too. Whereas like the Dr. Manhattan people that Lady True or Keen or maybe Angela in the end are not going to be as disinterested if there are future seasons, Well,
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, given the lack of free will and the apparent weirdness of decisions, right? Like, I mean, because it's not like, oh, this is the decision I would have made, and so I have to make it, right? Like, there's no universe, there's no reason why this, happily married Dr. Manhattan would have let himself be murdered, right? Like, there's no universe in which he would have made that decision. And so it's not like, oh, I made the decision once, and so I have to abide by it because I have no actual free will, right? Like, it's a decision he would never have made. And so in that sense, you could have Angela turn into, Lady Manhattan, right? And sorry, I guess Lady.
Oh, I like that. I don't know. I hadn't thought about what
Lady
your name would
Tulsa.
be. Yeah, Lady Tulsa or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Lady Saigon is taken, right?
Yeah,
or Queen Saigon.
Miss Saigon, yeah.
Yeah.
Miss
anyway,
Saigon.
You could have her turn into whatever, and then she like embarks on like a pogrom to like murder all, I don't know, Koreans, right? Just like a random, like, oh no, this is just what I decided to do. Why did I decide to do it? I don't know.
I saw myself doing it. I don't know. Yeah, it's crazy.
Right? Like, why did John decide to stand in front of the teleportation beam? Like, I don't know why he decided that. But that's what the future is. So that's what the future is. Like, I have no agency whatsoever.
This is, I guess, with a lot of media where I end up having these problems is like, if your world bends and, like, you say, I have a rule, but actually this is the rule, and your science is weird and you want to transfer the powers, and like, I'm with you, it's all made up. But like, if your character is like this and he's like, well, no one would ever do that. Why would he? It doesn't make any sense. Like, well, because I did it. You're right. It doesn't make sense. Like, when character motivations don't add up, it feels kind of hollow. But I think they did a really great job with the characters for like 90% of the season. And I think I said in the chat, I'm like 75% satisfied with like the way the show ended. But like 25% of it is like, oh, I just can't make 2 and 2 4 out of that. It just feels weird.
I mean, to be fair, if you took like a minute by minute, like, are you happy or not happy while I was watching the show? Like, it might have been as high as 70%. It's just that, like, my overall experience of it was still negative. but yeah, and I mean, like, there was a lot of stuff that I liked.
I think the show was doing two major things. It was telling the story of these characters, which mostly worked, and there were parts that I think kind of failed in the end and didn't work how I would have preferred. And then it was also trying to, and I mean, they said this several times, is that like the big issue of the graphic novel was, the threat of nuclear war and all that. It wanted to address this kind of big societal issue. So they were trying to address, racism and inequality. And, that's like kind of like the social issue at the moment. And I think it, for the most part, did a pretty good job on that throughout. It was pretty even, other than, like I said, there were some things that kind of felt a little heavy-handed. But, I mean, I think they did a good job at least giving people stuff to think about. Like, I never knew about the Tulsa riots or, I don't know. Like, there's just a lot of things they brought up. And I looked it up and like, oh, that was real. Yep, that happened. You're like, wow, okay.
Yeah, I feel like in the end, though, I feel like they did raise a lot of interesting and provocative things early, but I feel like in the end, just laser beaming all like 36 racist people as your solution or something.
Right.
Yeah.
There was no reveals. There was no
like old crippled racists. Like, oh, we got him, boys. All these these 12
is that
old
Senator
crippled
Key
racists.
Sr.? Is he still alive?
Yep, but now he's not. Got him. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what that's. I mean, I don't know what the takeaway from that, I guess, myself. But I mean, I think they're interesting things raised by Cal and Angela and Hooded Justice throughout the beginning, at least. But to me, just there's a bunch of old white racist people. I don't know. I feel like the graphic novel opened my eyes and made me look at things differently. I don't know that this show ever accomplished that, I guess. I don't know.
But Thomas, you're already woke. Maybe other maybe other people watch. Well, I say that facetiously, but maybe other people watching this,
He's definitely
it did.
not.
But I think
No.
like the show You on Netflix Lifetime made
The
me
murder thing?
Yeah, it actually made me look at like romantic
It
It
comedies.
made you realize
creepy,
how creepy
and creepy
bookstore owners are.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It actually opened my mind and made me look at certain things differently. And I don't feel like this show ever made me really
That's fair.
open my eyes, make me look at things any differently.
I guess not differently. I liked the very beginning. I mean, I'm not sure. I think I mentioned it in the episode 1 through 3 recap. Like, I liked that very first scene. I liked the traffic stop, like just like that different world where like cops have their guns locked, and like that kind of like I really enjoyed that in the first episode. Like, I thought about that for a while.
Yeah,
like
I
what
agree
about that?
completely.
They built a great world.
Like when they just threw us into 2019, it was great, and they just kind of like threw little things at us that were thought-provoking. But in the end, I just didn't feel like I got that much out of it.
And I feel like if you're not watching this with PDpedia, it's not the same experience.
If you're not watching it with PDpedia, and if you haven't watched the movie or read the graphic novel, I don't even know what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are those people, but I don't get that. But yeah.
I feel like because if you take it with like the PDpedia stuff, which I haven't read all of it, but I've read a lot of it, it I don't know. To me, it really enhances the experience, but it almost feels essential. Like not necessarily, just for the casual watcher, but like for me, for what I'm looking to get out of it.
I did like most of the characters most of the time, and I thought that they definitely did some thought-provoking or worthwhile things with racism and other stuff. For me, and I understand why it's not necessarily like a huge like deal breaker for everyone, but it's just the plotting, everything from, I mean, like from the very beginning of episode 4 with Lady True doing this ridiculous thing where she has to buy a house in 45 seconds. Like it's almost every single episode from there on out has at least like one ridiculous, like in some cases like episode 5, like the entire plot of episode 5 is just absurd, right? Like there's no reason for any of that shit with Wade, right? Like there's no reason to honey trap Wade and bring him somewhere. They could have had Senator Key knock on his door and say like, hey, Wade, could you come with me for a minute? right? Like just the whole thing.
Oh
is
yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah.
And it's just like plot
That's-
after plot after plot is just pointless and badly formed, and I can't get over it, and I can't let go of it, no matter how much I might like the characters or what the show is doing.
Well, I don't think it was that bad overall, but
I just don't get
okay.
7th Cavalry. Like, are they competent at all? Are they completely incompetent? Like,
I think they want to make them threatening,
yeah,
but they also want to make them like they're the bumbling white supremacists, but they're like full of like doctors and lawyers and scientists. But yeah, the whole thing with Mirror Guy, man, none of it made sense. Like, especially because they bring him in. And then now it's like they should either be trying to groom him to join them, and like we should be thinking that might happen, or they should just not not bother with him. And then it's like they are sort of bringing him in, and then just immediately they're going to go kill him. And I'm like, oh, so there's not really anything interesting about this. Like, they're just going to go kill him. Okay.
Didn't make sense, I guess. Why, as you guys have already said, why the reveal from Senator Keene if their plan is just to kill him anyway?
And then the other thing, right, is that like, and I suppose they couldn't have known this, but like just in terms of like me feeling frustrated with the episode, it's like if they had literally waited to do their plan for one day, then everything they wanted would have happened naturally, right? Like day one, Angela comes to him and is like, "Hey, you still haven't identified my pills?" And he's like, "Sorry, I'll do it today." And then the very next day, she would have come up to him. He would have explained what they were, and then Lori would have had everything she needed from the microphone and the cactus, right? Like everything that the 7th Cavalry did in that episode was completely unnecessary.
Oh, good point.
Like it would have happened naturally without them interfering in any way. And they couldn't have known that, I understand.
Yeah.
But just as me feeling frustrated by the show, it's like, well, okay, that accomplished nothing. Thanks.
A lot of good music in that episode, if that makes you feel better.
I really enjoy Wade. Like, I think he's fun, but it's just a very frustrating episode for me.
All right, the next episode was This Extraordinary Being, which is, I think, an episode that a lot of us were quite fond of. It was Angela taking the nostalgia and then largely just experiencing life as Will Reeves / Hooded Justice. And I said at the time in the chat, I could have watched 3 episodes of that. I really enjoyed. Again, I had issues with just the Cyclopsness of it, but just kind of 30s, 40s, New York City, racist cops, all that I found interesting. And Captain Metropolis and kind of our brief time with the Minutemen and stuff, I enjoyed all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I have no real complaints about it. Yeah. I found the flashback elements to be a little distracting whenever, like, her face would pop up as his face or whatever. I mean, I understand, obviously.
I actually thought it was going to be worse. I thought I handled that pretty well, in my opinion. I thought it was going to be.
It wasn't bad. Like, I didn't hate it. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. And then the rest of the episode was great. That was a very good episode that I liked.
So, can anyone explain why, like, the American Hero story is like trying to, like, smear Hooded Justice? Like, what's the point of that?
I mean, I guess I'm not sure. I sort of imagine that they like to smear all masked vigilantes because it's illegal and they don't like them anymore. But other than that, I don't know.
It's just meant to be purposely provocative because, like, they mentioned that.
But no one actually knows who he is in that world, right?
I don't think so.
Well, no, they follow the story of the rumor that Hollis Mason wrote about, because he put that in his book, the rumor about him being the German strongman. So they were just using that.
Right, and then him and Captain Metropolis. Okay, yeah. Okay.
In the voiceover, though, like, don't they say that he's not Hans Mueller or whatever, I feel like? Or
no, they're just... no, I think it was... my interpretation of that is that he just, faked his death.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says the first episode of the hero story was like smearing Rorschach, being like, "Oh, that's don't bother with those journals."
Yeah, they have a definite reason for that, though, where it's less clear what. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just a sensational show with kind of propaganda undertones. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So this, I mean, this is one of my like favorite episodes, obviously, as I mentioned, and I like the reframing of Hooded Justice. I kind of like the overall season long story thing of just, the generational trauma and kind of this, vigilante thing being kind of passed down through the generations, with eventually, his son like trying on the mask, and then, his mother trying to avoid that, and then, Angela becoming a cop. It was a good short scene with her and her mother. Her grandmother was just, well, of course you want to be a cop. And then you kind of get in the finale episode with her son seeing the suit and all that, and getting that look in his eye. So that was one of the things that I really enjoyed. And yeah, it's just some good kind of noir comic book bits, in that episode in particular.
Yeah, I really liked the scene in the grocery store or whatever, and how we see how it was portrayed in American Hero Story, and then how it really happened in real life, and that was I thought that was a lot of fun and an interesting take. Our next episode is an almost religious awe, which features a couple of scenes that I'm not crazy about. The trial of Adrian, as well as Lori just sitting there while she's slowly
that
goes
was a problem
down into this stupid trap.
What are you doing? Oh no! What's happening now?
They establish her as a badass. We know she's been a mass vigilante from like her teenage years. And then from that point on, they just kind of sidetrack her character and kind of make her really ineffectual and kind of like a damsel, kind of just waiting to be rescued, which I found really disappointing for her character.
For me as well. I liked Lori a lot. Like, it's a toss-up whether I was enjoying her Lori's stuff or Adrian's stuff more. But definitely one of my very favorite characters. And it was confusing. Like, I will give it that. She was like clicking a remote. Okay. But like, I find it very frustrating that she just sat there and let herself.
Yeah, get up.
Yeah, do something. She's trying to do something to you. Respond.
She just revealed that like she knows what's up. Like,
yeah. And then also has basically no agency until the very end of the last episode, in which she arrests Adrian. Okay, fine. Whatever.
I don't think that's
I don't
think that's legal. I don't
know. I mean,
they're in international Antarctica, though. She can do whatever she wants.
I guess. Yeah, anybody can hit Adrian in the head if you're in Antarctica.
With a wrench. So like it's the Three Stooges or something.
Yeah, well, that's another thing, right? I mean, that's obviously a very common movie trope, although one that irritates me every time it happens. You can't hit people in the head with heavy stuff. If they go unconscious, then something really, really bad happened to them when you hit them.
Especially it's like an 80-year-old guy. I mean.
Right. Who just had like a very out. Right, and who just had like a very traumatic space experience. Right, like he's not all the way back yet, but whatever. And so she's very tough and very cool, and I liked her a lot, and she's a lot of fun. And I was really looking forward to exploring Lori more, and just like how she felt about her relationship with what's Night Owl's name?
Dan Schreiber?
Dan, yeah. I was looking forward to maybe a little bit more like Dan stuff, like Senator Keene had dangled the possibility of a pardon for Dan. I was looking forward to that, or just anything with her. Like she was really fun
because they went on into the 90s together, and then she's like all anti-hero, and you're like, wait, what?
Right. I wanted to explore that journey, and maybe with Dan, maybe with like how Dan made one decision and she made another. I was looking forward to all of that, and even if we got no backstory from her, I was still just enjoying her. She was fun and she was cool. And then she spent an episode and a half,
at least,
2.5 episodes tied to a chair.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, all right. You just ran out of stuff for her, I guess. Maybe you could think of another. Never mind.
Yeah. At the same time, Looking Glass disappears completely. Oh.
Yeah, exactly the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Exactly the same. It just vanishes, and we're just sort of like, well, I guess he's out there
They're not
doing
important,
the thing.
I guess, is what they're
Yeah.
telling us or something. But
Maybe we should watch the 93rd conversation Angela has where she's like, wait, you can see the future? You can see the future? You can see the future? Sorry, we'll do that in the next episode.
All right, you know what? All right, at this point, can I just say my piece and leave?
please, yeah, go ahead.
Just because I'm a little tired tonight.
Understand.
So yeah, even I will admit that the thing in the chair thing was dumb, and yeah, as I said, the beginning of the episode, there wasn't enough for Laurie and Looking Glass to do during the convergence and the finale. And yeah, I think if there was a scene I wish they could have added, it would be to see Laurie and Dan's final job together, where they finally get caught, and like see how that played out and whatnot. I think that'd be pretty cool. So yeah, I just want to give like kind of a shout out to some like more of the stuff I really liked in this. I mean, sure, there might have been. I didn't have nearly as much problems with the plot as you guys did, and I thought they were pretty meticulous in kind of crafting this story together. And yeah, if anything, they could have used more stuff to fill in the gaps. And you know, with the obvious exception of like Lube Man, which I think should just been cut. There is I don't know. Besides that, there's very few things.
More Lube Man.
I would just cut offhand in order to kind of perhaps fill in some more stuff. But yeah, just some more minor things where, obviously Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor are really good with their compositions. Them and Ramen, they're kind of some of the best television composers these days, and so they did a really good job. And overall, the music choice was just so much fun.
Absolutely with you there. I enjoyed that a lot in almost every episode.
Agreed.
Yeah, especially episode 8. with all the blues songs in there. It's too bad we didn't get a little blue bell. Right, yeah, either Eiffel or the one they just did the Wonder Woman trailer too. Not Blue Valentine, but whatever the other one is called. But yeah, that was all really good. And there's just like a lot of like little bits of dialogue that I really enjoy. It's something I feel like the incorporation of like slang and everyday dialogue, it felt, a lot of written television is, it's of a certain style. It's more like heightened dialogue here and there, but like there are moments of dialogue in this that just felt like more real than you're used to in television. I really like that. A prime example is, man, get the fuck up off the pool and come in here and talk to me. It's that type of dialogue is something you very rarely like hear in television these days. And so I really enjoyed kind of that aspect of it. And yeah, so as I said, episodes 3, 6, and 8, I think were really good. We're all pretty satisfied with the finale. Although it could have been a little grander, and there was no real cool, like, Rorschach finale like you get in the comics.
I was wondering, because I really wanted to, if you could, because I agree with you on 3 and 6. I like those a lot. I was wondering if you would mind if you had anything to say about 8 specifically, because 8 was definitely the episode where I sort of realized like I'm not gonna like this. I'm definitely
right.
done.
Yeah, but I think
so. If you could talk about like what you liked about 8, I would like to hear that.
But I think it's just our differing subjective views and how we view Dr. Manhattan and his overall like role in this story.
Okay.
Whereas like I really liked the framing device of that conversation. And I thought it just had a nice like ebb and flow to it and to how it goes over the course of the episode. And I obviously really liked the very end where they go over, fight the 7th Cavalry off together, at least for a little bit until he, lets himself go. I don't know. I guess I always had, I like the reveal of Cal being Dr. Manhattan. And I just kind of,
that was fun.
And it's like, as soon as that happened and over the course of the episode, I just always kind of had this idea and assumption that Dr. Manhattan was going to die and move on because he was just done with this shit. And so that's just like one of those things where it made sense to me that if you were going to bring him into this story, and especially with the idea of them just like wanting to do a one-off season, that was always how it was going to be. And I liked the overall, passing of the torch over to Angela at the end of it.
I really like Yaya's performance.
Yeah.
Both as Cal and as Dr. Manhattan. I
Yes.
think he looks a little silly, just blue, but I really thought he gave a great performance.
I don't know. I don't understand
ways.
why they didn't. I don't understand why they didn't CGI him up a little bit once he was blue. Like, because it's not like Dr. Manhattan. I mean, in the movie, it's not like Dr. Manhattan looked exactly like
Billy Crudup.
Billy Crudup.
Oh, Billy Crudup.
Yeah. There you go.
But like Dr. Manhattan does not look exactly like Billy Crudup, right? Like it's not just like Billy Crudup but blue. So I thought that was weird. I also thought it was weird that they decided not to film him pre-Cal. I guess. I mean, I guess I'm not sure why they did that. Like, I thought that was weird and distracting that they like wouldn't look at him
Show his face,
until he turned into Cal. But then even after he turned into Cal, I don't understand why they didn't like CGI it up and make it like a version of Cal, but not Cal.
Yeah.
Well, they did it in parts. Like, part of it, they CGI'd him up. Like, they definitely CGI'd him up a little bit in parts of it. But yeah, the parts where it was just kind of like him in blue makeup, I agree that it was off. And I think if they could afford it, they should have just kind of stuck with the CGI parts all the way through as much as they could.
Him in the blue makeup, I think, made sense, like, in the bar, because he's supposed to be incognito, everyone's celebrating. But outside of that, I was like, just let's move. Can we not do this?
The bar we never see his face anyway. So like it really.
Yeah.
They don't have to
I think they never showed us his face, maybe because they were like, well, we don't want them to compare the actors or,
right.
But that didn't feel like it felt like a choice outside of the story they're telling and the show that they're making,
Yes.
like, because there's a movie or whatever, so we just want to kind of avoid that, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I didn't hate the choice. I can see why someone would be distracted or dislike it, but I didn't hate him in the bar kind of obscuring his face. I thought just with like his hands and his voice, it was a good performance.
It wasn't so much in the bar that bothered me. It was more just like, I mean, it was very
making
brief.
eggs and stuff.
It's later on.
It was when they were having their fights, and then when they were standing in the morgue. And then it was or not when they're having the fight, sorry, but when they were standing in the morgue, and maybe was there one other scene? I can't remember. But like when they were standing in the morgue, maybe one other place where they're like very clearly, deliberately not shooting his face because he doesn't want to look like. And it was just kind of like, okay, all right.
Well,
I don't know. It wasn't
chosen
bad.
the body
it
yet.
was distracting me, and it was distracting me. I guess is the only complaint I really have about it.
I think it removed a little bit of the majesty or whatever, the awe, I guess, what we're supposed to have for him. But again,
where is Ghost? That's all I want to say.
I thought the performance was great. To me, it's either the best performance or the second best after Jeremy Irons, depending on your taste for that version of
How
Adrian.
much scenery chewing you enjoy?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm always here for Jeremy Irons in anything.
Me too, 100%. Yeah, I love everything.
I feel like I need to rewatch the first few episodes, just see how he's playing it.
Yeah.
I don't know, knowing what we know now.
Okay, Matt. Anything else? If you do want to go, I don't want to hold you, but if you do have anything else to say, I generally agree with all your points on the music, and there are some very good episodes. But I feel like I'll let you talk. I don't want to say just if you have any.
No. I mean, look, I decided about 30 minutes ago in this conversation that I wasn't gonna try and get into the weeds with this. And I that's why I knew it was going to be like this coming in, because I just knew that the points we were going to disagree and argue upon were just going to be all self-perspective, subjective type things. And there's no way to really talk around that.
I think when Michael says like he doesn't respect the writers, I guess that I think just to have my thing out there, that's a ridiculous statement. This is one of the best, writers' rooms put together for a show in a while. And I generally agree with Michael on a lot of stuff, but
I don't have a problem with the writing like as far as like I didn't disagree with you saying that like there was good dialogue and good script writing and things like that. I just I don't. I mean,
you felt
I really,
they hand waved stuff that like didn't
I'm
work.
baffled why they can't write a story. I just legitimately don't understand it. I'm not saying they don't have the talent to do it. Obviously they decided that they didn't care, and I don't understand why anyone would not care that their story doesn't make any fucking sense. Like I'm legitimately just I don't understand. Like I obviously anyone they could write a story if they wanted to, and they decided the story is completely irrelevant. And it seems like that it's like making a sandwich or something, right? And it's like, oh no, the bread is not important. We're not going to put the bread on there. What makes a sandwich good is all the ingredients inside of it. And it's like, yeah, but if you don't have the bread, you have like a sloppy mess on the counter. You have to put the bread down first.
I will say that I feel like you're correct on a couple of the through lines of the plot, but not on the show entirely, at least not to me. Like, I know, like, Lindelof said one thing he was really afraid of was, I get another ending and people are going to think I stuck it. And, like, he's just real worried about fucking up the ending. I don't think he fucked up the ending necessarily. I do think that the problems are in kind of the through line of a couple of different plots that just don't work for me. But overall, like I said, I think it was a satisfying ending. I think maybe, like, if they did a little more, maybe, that would have allayed some of these concerns. But there are definitely some things that, it's hard to get over the fact that, like, Manhattan, it's like you could have made that work. You could have just said, I was just tired or something. You could have thrown, like, one line in there and been like, oh, okay, so he's like, he let this happen.
Well, I would just say I think there's, and kind of discussed in the chat a little bit, but I think there's a difference between sticking the landing of a 9-episode self-contained story and like 5 seasons of television.
Yeah.
And, like, the journey is completely different. There are things to enjoy away. This is one 9-hour.
They're just making it up as they go, though, necessarily either. Like Lost, like season to season, they were like, where are we going, guys? As long as we end on that eyeball, everything's good. You're like,
I can't comment on. I just have no reference on that. But I don't think it's a complete fucking mess, and I think there's a lot good here. I just feel like they either need to spend more time on some things, or they need to spend less time on some other things. I feel like the pacing, to me, is just derailed by constant flashbacks. Maybe this is why we didn't get a 5-year gap in A Song of Ice and Fire or something, but I think if you're going to tell a story with so many flashbacks that it needed some more time in the present, where I think 7th Cavalry feels half-baked. I think Lady True, if you want to hold her reveals to the very end, then maybe you don't want to show as much, but I feel like we need more of her motivation as well. And Cal / Dr. Manhattan, maybe we do, like when he's reading Chinua Achebe, Everything Falls Apart, I feel like they're telling us that he's okay with dying at the end of the story. Maybe, I don't know if that's giving them too much credit, too little credit, but they never quite have him say the words, like, I don't know. I feel like he knows that his existence is going to end, and it's been a really lonely life kind of thing, but at the same time, then he's almost consigning or inviting Angela to have that same kind of lonely existence. I don't know. I can't quite wrap my head around his motivation either completely. And maybe that's just not knowable because of the character he is, but I feel like they could have done a little bit more to give us why he's doing what he's doing. And one question I just have does he say, like, to Angela, don't touch the light or don't go into the light or something like that?
He does. Yeah.
What is that in reference to?
Yeah, I don't know.
While we're all here.
Maybe the light that comes like 2 minutes later to suck him up, or...
But she couldn't get into the cage anyway.
I guess. I mean, I
don't know what that was.
I feel like he's separately telling her to move back, though. But, like, the light thing seemed like a very specific, like the water or the egg or whatever. It seemed like a very specific thing that I don't... Maybe I just missed it, but I don't feel like it was...
Maybe it has something to do with he's expecting her to inherit the powers, and it's got something to do with, like, when he was putting himself back together. I don't know.
Yeah, and I could speculate about, about how perhaps him giving her a warning as to how she would treat, becoming a Lady Manhattan, but it's not clear, and that probably giving too much credit over that line, filling in the gaps ourselves where perhaps the writing should have filled more of the gaps in that space.
I just want to say, as the person who originally said Lady Manhattan, that I understand that women can be doctors and that Dr. Manhattan does not have to be gendered in any way. And I regretted it.
Ouch.
I regretted it like a second and a half after I said it.
I mean, trust me, for comic names, it could be much worse. Like if they're not going to call her like Black Manhattan or something like that, which is usually what they kind of do.
No, if she's a female doctor, they would just call her Angela.
Yeah.
Dr. Knight is pretty good, actually. That might already exist.
Oh, Dr. Knight's pretty good, yeah.
So going forward, if someone does pick this up, like I see the only way this working is like she got the egg and it gave her some powers, but it didn't make her like the all-seeing blue asshole.
I can't even imagine how it would work myself.
Yeah, I don't know what you would do, and I thought about it very briefly before deciding that I didn't want to think about it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, because do you want to follow her as like the adventures of Dr. Manhattan with no one to challenge her?
To figure out, because because John was a physicist and had a very particular kind of like putting things together type of brain, and so it's possible that power set would be much more difficult to handle for someone who was not, didn't have that kind of mind, and so like it would be interesting to see if just I think about it. Other time, I don't know, because I like thinking about superheroes. But like, if you were telekinetic, just how hard would it be to actually to really figure out how to grip things properly with your brain, right? Like, how much force on this side of a bottle versus that side of the bottle before the whole bottle just like flies across, like that kind of thing.
I'm fine with them, this being it and them not doing another season of this. This was good enough for me, and I can't imagine where they would go from here. So I'm cool with it just being done. I had fun with what we got. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you, Matt. I'm sorry if we made it unpleasant for you.
Me too, and I'm glad we had someone on here who liked the show a lot more than I did, because
right, yeah,
I didn't just want to bitch about it. I mean, I did want to do that, but I was honestly glad to have somebody else or somebody who wanted to talk about what they liked. So
yeah, we need a little counterbalance on that one. All good, man. All right, thanks, I'll see you guys next time.
See ya.
I don't want to give the impression I didn't enjoy it. Like I said, I think in the first part, it made me really enjoy my Mondays. It gave me something to think about at work and listen to podcasts at work on Mondays, which makes life slightly more tolerable at work. So I did enjoy it. I just feel like in the end, and I kind of suspected this the whole time from the very beginning, that I wasn't going to be happy with this particular story.
Yeah, and
I would have loved to have been wrong, but I don't.
And I'm in the same place, and I mean, it might be, I can't remember what Bina said in the first episode. She's intimated that there was something wrong with us, which is possible.
And then she said it jumped the shark about.
She did, but then she also really liked 8 and 9, so yeah. I don't know.
I don't think a 9-episode show can jump a shark either, by the way. But that's a fight I'll have with Bina at some other time, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what part she was talking about, jumping the shark. But then, like, didn't she say she rewatched and she was like, it's fine.
I think she did. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it may very well just be that like I'm broken in some sort of way, but I don't understand. I don't feel like I'm asking for a lot for the plot to make sense, and I don't understand why they just won't write one where it does.
Okay, I think we've.
Do you think we've drifted from the point at all?
Maybe. I thought this was all. I
feel like we're on topic. Is that not right?
This is all after show. This reminds me
this is all.
We still need to do like that series of World War II podcasts we're talking about. That'd be a lot of fun.
Another thing I'd like to complain about before we go, because I want to end this with me complaining about things, is Adrian said that his frozen squids were going to destroy everything in a 2-block radius, and the only thing it destroyed, literally the only thing, was Lady True and the device. Everything else was fine. Angela ran a block with a plastic thing over her head and was fine.
Did you not see the plot armor on her though?
Yeah, it was glowing like the sun.
Like
It was a pelican case, man. Have you ever had one of those pelicans?
The clone mom
I
is
do have
just
a
sitting there
pelican
in the
case. I have a couple.
impenetrable Dr. Manhattan phone booth.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
The theater, nothing like it
No,
rips
nothing.
through
You
her
couldn't even hear the
high-tech
noise.
metal.
Yeah. You couldn't
I-
even hear anything in the theater. Like, it was just quiet. It was
Like cops are
so
dying,
the kids could
their
sleep.
cars are being destroyed. I did think that was weird that
It looked like
stuff
a
wasn't
bad
shooting
hailstorm.
through.
They had a scene. They had a.
And
they had a
what
flashback
got
after-
transported exactly? Like just random set pieces, like the church background, like
Yeah.
It was like part of. Yeah.
like what got transported, and then they had like their magnetic garbage can
What I
lids or
feel
whatever.
like is that like that was just the set they've been using, and they just were like, everyone pull the cameras back.
And Jim Beaver just in one scene for no reason? I don't get that.
Who is that? I don't know who that is.
He's the guy from Deadwood. He was Topher and those kids' grandfather.
Oh, okay.
He's just like on the porch. I was like,
Oh.
we're obviously going to go back to him, right? But
I guess not.
yeah. Anyway, yeah, I just felt like they don't have to answer every question, but it just felt like stuff.
It's also interesting that if they can teleport the synthetic lithium, why exactly can Dr. Manhattan not?
That they could what?
They can teleport synthetic lithium, right? It's not like synthetic lithium is somehow immune to everything.
Yeah.
Some sort of magical field.
Yeah, but they're using some other kind of device. See, like
You think they invented a separate form of teleportation?
they've got like an adapter on it that
Well, of course, in the same way that obviously you have to filter the power before you absorb it yourself. You can't just absorb that raw power. You got to filter it.
That's right. Unless you either filter it through
a big ball.
glowy ball, or
you
with the purple
explode.
lights, or you put it in an egg. One of the two.
That's right. Like those are the ways that you could filter it. Yeah.
I did think it was hilarious that she was like, "Is he in here?" And I was like, "Oh, it's about to go bad." I didn't think their plan was going to work from the beginning, but like before the reveal of like, oh, they're gonna like that's what I thought when they're like, oh, they're gonna try to steal Dr. Manhattan's powers. I'm like, shit. I thought that might have been what's going on. They're gonna try to like fucking trap Dr. Manhattan, but I'm like, wait, where the fuck is Dr. Manhattan? And then they told us a second later, and I was like, oh, did not expect that. Okay, but it just, I don't know, man. I wanted to see someone else turn blue, and then like you kill them or something,
Have y'all ever? Do y'all know the Royal Tenenbaums, the movie?
Yes.
Aware, but I don't think I've seen it.
So Owen Wilson. Owen Wilson's a very, very minor character in it, and he's to me this is the perfect metaphor. Maybe it'll be stupid, and if it is stupid, then just cut it out. But
no, leave it in.
So Owen Wilson, thanks. Owen Wilson's like a very minor character in the Royal Tenenbaums, and he's like this like pretentious writer who's like seems like he's probably kind of an idiot, but he has like come to fame with this novel. And he's being interviewed, and he's, doing his own Wilson voice or whatever. And he's like,
right.
So this novel, everybody knows that Custer died at the Battle of Little Bighorn. But what this novel presupposes is maybe he didn't. And I feel like that was the writer's room where everybody's like, everyone knows Dr. Manhattan is an immortal, undefeatable god.
And he can only be blue.
So presupposes is maybe he isn't.
It's interesting. I feel like having someone not like get the powers or like not dealing with the consequence of that feels like a cop out, especially in a season where it's supposed to be Angela's story and it's about racial tensions and issues, and you had the reparations, and they set up all this stuff in the season, and like who saves the day at the end? The smart virgin white dude, like the incel, or I guess he's a voluntary civil dead. I guess. But you're like really? Like Adrian Veidt shoots like the squid cannon, and that's the solution. Which I mean, yeah, sure it works, but like I don't know. It would have been nice if maybe like she had already turned, and then they had to do something else. Yeah,
I did not like the resolution there.
The resolution was way too fast and too. It felt unearned. It felt just like
she would turn, and then like he would have somehow either like his little thing in the blood puddle, or I guess the egg could have been a thing that she brought with her. I don't know.
Yeah, something.
Like she would have gotten the powers too, and then you would have had like a god off kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I was very unhappy with the idea of anybody getting Dr. Manhattan's powers, because to me they don't feel like they're transferable.
Yeah.
But if that was going to happen, then sure, I would have liked to have. I mean, like if you're going to do that, then why not have a couple of them?
Yeah, and see what happens. Or maybe they both just go, you know what? We both don't care anymore.
Yeah, or they're both just like, fuck it.
we're both going to Europa.
Well, so that was actually something, and I knew it wouldn't happen because obviously you couldn't have it happen. But I was kind of hoping on some level that Senator Keene would get the powers, and then as soon as he got them, he'd be like, "Oh my god, I'm so stupid! Like you're such a fucking moron."
He was just like, "Racism is terrible."
Yeah, like, well, it's just like this is such a waste of everyone's time. Like, I'm just gonna go. I'm not gonna do any of the stuff we planned for. I feel
he explodes all of the 7th Cavalry people. Is like, I apologize. I'm gonna go try to make this better now.
Well, no, I don't think you should try to make it better. I think you just be like, I was so dumb. Like nothing matters. Everything is pointless. I'm gonna go.
Right. I mean, I guess those were questions they didn't really want to ask. I mean, but I think, and to Lindelof's credit, I mean, there's things he said in the podcast that there are some things that like come up in the graphic novel, and there are all these questions about well, what is a guy, like when he's meeting, Silk Spectre at 16 and he knows they're going to be together, it doesn't really like what is he really thinking? Like, what's it like to be in that state? Like,
sure. I mean, I think
they followed the stuff that they found interesting. I can't fault them for that, but.
I wish. I mean, like, I don't know. Like, I think in some ways it would have been a bad decision if they had tried to explore that more. But it is something that it's, I think maybe it's not possible to understand, and that ultimately it doesn't make any sense. But yeah, before they had him essentially committing suicide, I would have liked for them to have explored it more with just like what is Dr. Manhattan's experience like? Like, to what extent does he feel like he's making decisions at all? Because in conversation, it does seem like he's, like when he's talking to somebody, it feels like he's flowing in the conversation. It doesn't feel like he's like, oh, what did I say next? Right. Okay. That's what I'll say. It feels like he's flowing. And so he feels like he makes decisions, but obviously he doesn't.
And I guess they kind of like, take that with where he's like, oh, well, he's sort of, sometimes he's here, sometimes he's other places.
Yeah.
And I think that's their, cause I guess he's everywhere all at once, but it's also still like his basis is a human mind. He's not necessarily a god mind.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So he maybe does have some limitations from that. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, you can't explain, stuff.
No, you can't.
It's too much.
Right. It's like if you had a time travel movie and you were actually trying to explain time travel. It's like, well,
I just want to know like why the Millennium Tower thing didn't take place at the Millennium Tower, and why it's this tiny little sphere that she could have just built in a hangar. Like, you know what I mean? Like you got this giant tower. Like, what's the point of the tower then? Like,
yeah, no, that's a perfectly fair point.
I mean, like, most of these things don't matter. I know they don't matter. I'm not like, it's not like make or break the story. I felt like at some point, it's like someone's writing this. Like, did they ask like, well, should we have more of that? Should we connect that? Should we, like, I wonder if that ever came up. I don't know.
I don't know. I really don't. I wish that I understood what a TV writer's room was like, because I can't imagine what it is that they decide to do.
Well, I don't know. How many people are in a writer's room usually? Like a dozen or 5? Or imagine like us sitting around and I'm like, I got this great idea. And this is like what Lindelof has said. Like, not all of my ideas are gems, And like sometimes I'm like, I'll fight you and I make them do my idea. And sometimes they're like, dude, no. And they're right. So it's a balance of kind of just the minds in the room, I guess. It's sort of like, if you have enough people that think one way, maybe you end up with a different ending versus a different writer's room, obviously, based on what they like. I don't know, because he had a few stupid ideas that he mentioned in like the HBO podcast that I was like, oh yeah, that wouldn't have worked well. Good thing we didn't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if Alan Moore is Alan Moore, but maybe one person's vision, I don't know, might have been better. I don't know.
Yeah, sometimes
it's all
it is,
subjective,
but... And what Alan Moore was kind of not particularly keen on this adaptation, right?
I mean, he
I
doesn't
think
like
just-
any adaptation.
Yeah, I think it's...
He doesn't
Right.
like switching mediums.
He was kind of low key, but he said, I don't know if he said, did he say anything about the movie when it came out? But I know he said about
Yeah,
this,
he
like
hated
he
it.
was like
He
he was
hated
like,
it.
I don't think he's seen it. I'm sure he's
No,
not.
he hasn't. I mean, yeah, from what I've
he was
heard,
like, I don't
he's
think
not
that the
watched
story
anything.
needed to continue. Like, there's no, my story is my story. I don't know why you, which, fair enough.
I don't disagree with him, but
Yeah, but again, it's hard when they cast great actors and they pose challenging questions, and they craft the world so well, and they spun us along for 9 episodes, and they had the Peteypedia stuff, and we've been talking about it, and this is how many shows are like this now, where you want to follow along, you want to talk with people about it. Like, I think to me that's a success. And the show, the ending wasn't a complete failure. I think it mostly worked. So,
yeah, I got some joy out of it. Ultimately, it just didn't work for me, and then that was always my fear. Any more Watchmen?
No. I mean, I
No.
complaining, but I guess I'm.
No, I feel bad that Matt felt like maybe he was getting, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I
have a
did.
voice,
I
but,
felt bad about that too. I didn't want to. I never want to like talk over people or like feel like that they can't comment, but I was unhappy. So.
Well, I'm glad I could help you, Ven.
as a white man, it's hard in America, and I felt my voice needed to be heard.
Well, we were an all white man cast, right? So.
Yeah, I tried. I tried to be inclusive, but that's who showed up. So.
Yeah,
I know. I did like Senator Keene's speech where he's like, "It's gotten hard out there
so
for the white
hard to be
man."
white. Yeah, that was funny. I mean, he was actually. I will say actually, I thought he did a pretty good job in his comedic scenes. Like he was pretty bland. I thought before that, but like when he was, I don't know. But like when he was doing stuff that like he thought he was being serious, but everybody else thought he was being an idiot. Like he was pretty funny. He was pretty funny doing that stuff. Like stripping
to be
off.
fair, I think the Redford
stripped off. Like that was funny.
Yeah, I think the Redford regime is pretty. I don't know. Would have been pretty awful from what they tell us. But
okay, this is irony, and I mean, just as probably happenstance, but the actor's name is James Wolk. Sounds like James Woke.
Woke.
Just saying.
Yeah.
Just saying. You could pronounce it Woke. W-O-K. Yeah.
is that Jock?
He just looks like the stereotype of a senator in popular fiction.
Like a young senator.
The young hotshot.
Yeah.
They don't all look like Count Chocula.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they all look like 78-year-old white dudes that have been in the same job for way too long.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Yeah, but like it's how they're sort of portrayed in popular fiction. Like even like
all
Petrelli.
Jack Kennedy. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Hopefully, Bina and David get a chance to record some additional positive material.
Too. Yeah, I would like people to be able to do a positive version. I would like to do that.
Yeah.
So
Again, I'm not the negative version entirely.
You've been dragged down by association. I've tainted everyone.
I feel like at the end of the day, it's like a 3 or a 2.5, I guess, which is fine. But it's not Watchmen.
All right. Oh, shots fired. All right. It's been real.
But thank you all. Please visit the podcast Ice and Fire forums and listen to Vessels of Kingsgrave.
How do you turn this shit off?
Hey everyone, it's Bina007 here to provide some balance, apparently, alongside David.
Hi, DavidHHH on the forums.
And maybe chipping in just to tell us just how doomster it went on the other part is Michael.
Hey, it's Michael Mordion on the.
So, what would be your lemon cake rating, David, for this season?
I'm going to give it 4.5. I liked it a lot. Maybe even 4 3/4. So
what are you docking? What are you docking that little quarter of a lemon cake for?
Nothing in particular. I mean, there were a few things that didn't work perfectly, a few things that maybe needed a little more time, a few things that went nowhere. But otherwise, I think it was a great 9 hours of television, a good series. It did what it set out to do, and was an enjoyable sequel to Watchmen.
I completely agree. I'm like 4.5. I'm docking it half a point because Chernobyl is my 5, and there's literally nothing I would have changed in Chernobyl. And there were things in Watchmen which, if people have listened to not just the HBO Craig Mazin podcast, but also the Damon Lindelof interview on Hollywood Reporter, there are things that happen in the season where obviously the writers' room decided to change course, and I think that was evident. But I really, really ended up liking this a lot, and I think it's all to do for me with fulfillment of themes that were set up and explorations of an issue that I don't often see explored in an earnest, intelligent, and sensitive way. How about you? So what is it that made it so good for you? What did you really respond to?
I mean, I thought all the characters were at least interesting and good extrapolations from the graphic novel / comic book series. Because actually it was a comic book series before it was ever considered a graphic novel. Technically, it's not even one. But I don't know. I liked the exploration of racism and the idea of like racial trauma of a whole community from what, prejudice does to people. I liked that it explored those ideas in showing the new characters, and in particularly showing like Dr. Manhattan, how his life would be a little different as a black man, and how maybe exploring the whole like Vietnam and how that becoming a state made things different. And just these characters were all interesting. The storyline was well done. It was certainly a gonzo crazy, scheme at the end, which the original certainly was. I liked making the squids an actual like important part of the plot.
Yeah. It's like a fuck you to the film, isn't it? You chose to ignore the squids because you thought that was obviously just way too absurd for a cinema audience to take.
Right.
And so we are going to double down on the squids, and then we're going to give you an Eggman because at the end of the day, when you get your head around believing in a giant alien squid, then what is transferring magical powers through an egg?
Right, exactly.
It's kind of audacious, but I think it's in keeping with the original Watchmen. Like I've seen some criticism of that whole kind of device, and I'm like, you recognize there was a giant alien squid in the original.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, to be fair, I don't think it was a bad choice to get rid of the squid in the movie, because I think it is true that that's a little too much for some audiences. I know definitely when the comic came out, a lot of people were like, what? That's what this all built to? But, that said, I kind of like the, homage to the original and the love of the original being used in here, and then turning it into, the end plot at the end was really cool. I also like the fact
freeze them.
Right. I also like the idea that like we finally got to see the squid on screen, during Looking Glass's hour, which was kind of cool, and it was ominous and awful and creepy, whereas it could have just been dumb and silly.
Yeah, I actually had forgotten how good that Looking Glass losing his V card scene was. That was so good. But for me, mostly, I think, as a woman of color, although not from a country with such a horrific relationship with race issues, it is cool. And looking back at that poster, as Lindelof says, hiding in plain sight, where you have Sister Night basically blue like Dr. Manhattan against the Watchmen yellow circle. It's kind of like, it's so audacious. And this idea, maybe it's a bit too on the nose, of little African-American girls looking at, well, probably hopefully not watching this because it's too adult, but just seeing a hero on screen that looks like you and doesn't just look like you, but comes freighted with all the cultural and historical and social baggage that being a person of color in America today must bring. I thought was fascinating. And this idea of just playing it out like in so many ways, fathers and daughters and mothers, legacy, what is legacy, the Vietnam War, Lady True with her mum, daughter. It was just so well done. And actually, the other thing I wanted to point out when we on the subject of race was seeing two very powerful people in the comic. Well, one retconned as a black guy, and Dr. Manhattan rebodied as a black guy was powerful. But to me, it was all about Lady True, because the previous film I had seen, the actress who plays her, Hong Chua, in, was a really terrible film. I think it was called Downsizing. It starred Matt Damon, and it was this film about people who like shrink themselves to have a cheaper retirement. And she was cast as this kind of Vietnamese cleaner, the kind of character who in the final episode of this is, you know, here we intelligently say, oh, you ignore the cleaner, right? And it was such a caricature, like the very kind of like rich white man who directed that film just made her almost play it like a pastiche, to a point where I was sitting in the audience of the film saying, this is racist, right? Like, you can't do that kind of character in 2018 or whenever I watched it. So to see Lady True, but to see Lady True, this ownership of what has happened in Vietnam, and I'm going to make it right, and this and that and the other. And the only thing I felt sad about at the end was kind of like, I felt she deserved better. Like, her only crime was, I mean, she was stealing Dr. Manhattan's power, which is not right. But she wants to, in a sense, do better. Like Will Reeves says at the end, like, for someone with so much power, he did so little. Right. And I just felt like, I get there's narcissism there and takes one to know one. But I was just like, yeah, so another high-handed old white rich dude decides to just fucking chuck a frozen squid through her hand and end it.
I mean, realistically, we don't know what she was going to do with it. Was she going to do great things? She seemed to want to. But, you know, I guess the question is, if you're going to start off by getting your powers by killing someone, then, you know, maybe that's not someone who should have those powers.
But someone who allows themselves to die. I mean, there's a whole free will and fatal thing around Dr. Man.
Right. Which I thought was really fascinating.
Yeah, which is really fascinating, and it bends my mind. But the other thing is, we don't know what Sister Night is going to do with her powers either. Exactly.
I mean, she says she wants to make the world better, and, you know, if she's as smart as she says she is, maybe she would have. Maybe she would have fixed all these problems. Maybe she could have even been the one character who does fix racism.
Oh no, I mean Sister Night. So if you think Sister Night is now effectively Sister Night Manhattan.
Right.
And as Lindelof says, the twist is not whether she's going to walk on water, because we see the poster, we know she is.
Right.
The question is this very angry, traumatized woman who now holds the traumatic memories of her grandfather and has lost her husband, who she loves. Is this going to be, do we want an active Mrs. Manhattan with this kind of baggage? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I didn't, when I first finished watching it, I did not think it needed a sequel, and I didn't think I'd even want a sequel. But I mean, there is a certain question of what would she do with these powers, and that could be really fascinating television. I don't know.
And also what happens, you know, with, I mean, to me, it's like the perfect ending, because it's exactly the same as Watchmen, which is, you know, you don't know if Rorschach Journal is going to be read or come out into the open. We don't know what's going to happen with Adrian Veidt being arrested by Laurie and Looking Glass, and we don't know what Sister Night's going to do. And I'm kind of happy.
Yeah.
I love this season of TV. I'm very happy to never have another season again. That's okay with me. But even like little things like the attention to detail in the final episode where shit's all going down, and then they're hiding in the little booth with the daughter, like from the frozen squids, and it's got the Oklahoma poster on the front. Just the way in which, because that is like a fucking weird film. I remember watching that for the first time about 10 years ago, thinking this is like a really psychosexually messed up, weird ass film. So I love that they take the of it. I want to watch it all again now. I want to binge watch it and just really pick up on some of those small, brilliant internal references.
Yeah, I mean, one of the weird things for me is that I was actually way behind in all of this because I've been really busy because work is crazy right now at holiday season. But you know, it's weird that I watched I read the original comics monthly when they first came out, which is how it was intended. Whereas most of you, I think, have all read it kind of as the quote unquote graphic novel, which is the collection of them, which is a different experience, right? So this one, I actually I've mostly binged.
Well, it's only different. It's only different if you read it all in one go. Like most people don't read in that way, right? Like, so for instance, I remember very distinctly getting Alan Moore's From Hell, which I would love to send off tackle next. And I remember very clearly because it was so intense reading that almost one chapter every 2 weeks or whatever. So, or even longer maybe, because that was pretty brutal. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you.
No.
Michael, are you standing there listening in just complete shock at the praise we're heaping on this?
No, not at all. It was mostly I didn't want to like I kept wanting to say things that we sort of talked about last time, and then I was thinking like, well, I mean, like there's no real reason to discuss like everything.
Right.
I will say like it's definitely a very, I mean, that's why I wanted to do the call. What y'all are talking about is, and I mean we touched on some of course, but like I don't know, maybe I tend to media in a more juvenile way or something, I'm not sure. But like I get very plot focused, or I get very, if I feel like the plot does, then I have a really hard time appreciating anything else. And so that was most of my problem. Just stuff
okay.
that I just like, this doesn't make sense, and there's no
Well,
reason.
that makes sense, because, I mean, like, it is a very complicated plot, and it's also a plot where they obviously did take a different turn, and I acknowledge that. So I get if that's the way, if you're super sensitive to that, then I can see why this would have lost you. I would say that I consumed this, and sometimes I'm really plot driven, but for this, I consumed it. And actually, I'm normally character driven, and I wasn't really character driven for this. I was very thematic driven.
Right.
And maybe that's a problem with it, because actually, when I think of the characters, apart from Lady True, who I loved, and Adrian Veidt, who was just deliciously funny, I don't really care about Angela, Ava, or Cal, which is terrible, right?
No,
to me, it was just all about themes and thinking about politics.
Right,
Yeah,
which is
so
what
Sorry, go ahead, David.
I was going to say that, which actually is what I think Watchmen was. You know, I mean, I think the original Watchmen was more about the themes than just the individual characters. Although we did get lots of great characters and character moments, but it definitely wasn't as plot driven. I mean, I don't think, you know, for instance, whodunit was all that important in the end. It was, but it was really about the ideas, and particularly, you know, in the world, you know, the biggest issue at the time was the threat of nuclear holocaust, and it was really addressed in a strong way. And I feel like, you know, in this world, at least in America, you know, racism is certainly one of the huge issues. And I think how that's important to you and how your take on that might change your enjoyment of this. Because I mean, I think, you know, Bina as a person of color and me as a gay man in America, you know, these themes resonate with us, where, you know, the idea of, you know, Sister Knight looking for an image of herself, and all she can find is, you know, this blaxploitation character, you know, and yet she still wanted it and clung to it and ended up becoming it, and, you know.
And by the way, that's a real blaxploitation character, which is kind of cool.
Right.
But I mean, like, looking back on it retrospectively, I do worry a bit if the character isn't good enough and the plot's not good enough. Is it really a 4.5, 4.75? And actually, it just struck me that it's a little bit like Game of Thrones in that respect, right? The book, because both Watchmen and this Watchmen and Game of Thrones start off with a murder and almost start off as a whodunit with someone trying to investigate it. And actually, that's just not completely beside the point, but it's just a door into something much bigger, wider, and more complicated. You know, poor Judd is dead though. And he did turn out to be KKK, which was just so sad. I was hoping it was just his dad, but no.
But on some level, I mean, you know what? Sometimes that person you think might be racist just is. You want them not to be. You want them to be a good person. You want to think better about them, but, you know, then the N-word comes out, or, you know, or something just as bad but more subtle, and, you know, you have to kind of accept that, you know, I like this person, but
everyone's a little bit racist.
Yeah. So that's kind of appropriate in some ways. I mean, maybe that was even the intent, was to have us be like, oh, come on, no, he can't be. Oh, he is. Yeah.
And I want to just throw out a little bit of praise to Damon Lindelof, because he's talked a lot about being inspired by Ta-Nehisi Coates' long form essay, I think, on the Tulsa riots, and kind of self-aware enough to say, I recognize it was a bit insane for me to tackle this. Like, do I even have a right to tackle it? But it just seemed to me that it was just done in a really fair, earnest, sensitive, interesting way. And I think there should be space for that. I don't think anyone should be constrained from that. And I love, you know, this is a big HBO show, and we don't see these issues discussed on big HBO shows very often. And I just, apart from Wire.
A critique I read of the racism discussion aspect of the film that I read after yesterday was sort of criticizing it just because I guess that it was maybe a little too simplistic in some way, that you had this like at the very end with Lady True, where all the 7th Cavalry, the Cyclops higher ups, it's sort of like you have this like very secret cabal of old white people, but there's sort of like no real exploration of like the masked police and the kinds of damage that kind of like state power does, like even without that, like just sort of like all of the racism stuff was about these like individual people who were comedically rather than sort of like the societal kinds of.
Actually, that's not what I got, because I think for sure they are the kind of like the extremist white supremacists of our world, but they show you what kind of just insidious low level racism is like all the way through, I feel. And they do it in things like the fact that Adrian Vight's Vietnamese cleaner is basically unnoticed. They did it by showing the way in which Angela Abar goes about her business and how people react to that. I think, to me, like, you can't say it's all about one cabal when all the way through from the time of Will Rees. I mean, the Tulsa race riots are not just caused by the Cyclops or whatever, right? So I feel that was kind of, and just the whole way that Vietnam and like a war of occupation is treated, I felt kind of, it's there in the background. I mean, for me anyway. And even like to a certain extent, you see the childhood of John Osterman as a refugee because his mum left his dad for a Nazi and his dad's Jewish. I mean, so it's not just about Cyclops. It's just about the fact that it's humanity. And this is the sadness of Dr. Manhattan, right? This is why Dr. Manhattan Mark 1 is so passive, because he comes to believe that what's he going to do? How will he intervene? Humanity is just humanity. And it just has low-level prejudice in it. And yes, we have these caricature white supremacists. But in a way, I think having Lady True using them shows that they aren't this all-powerful secret cabal. They're just a bunch of Muppets, right? And having the junior Senator Keene, I mean, like with his like grandiloquent speeches. I mean, he is a figure of fun, but I think that's very deliberately done. I don't think we're meant to think that if you take those guys out, there's no more racism in the world.
Right. I think killing them is not the solution. But can I just, on a side note,
but it is fun.
If we're gonna have a villain giving his grand speech to the world of what his plan was, can he do it almost naked all the time? Because that was just, he was so hot. James Woke is so hot, and I was just like, I actually had to stop a couple of times and be like, wait a minute, let me rewind, because I wasn't quite hearing what he was saying. I'm distracted by his chest.
I'm so juvenile. I was like, are they going to show the blue penis? Are they going to show the blue penis?
Right. By the way, did you note that as an interesting side note, did you note that when he doesn't actually go naked, but he wears the V shorts? Do you know those are the same V shorts that Dr. Manhattan wore when he attacked Vietnam?
Right, the ridiculous ones from the
Yeah.
That was a nice touch.
Cool,
it was a very
a
ridiculous touch. But
like the sumo boyfriend.
Yeah, almost. Yeah.
Right.
To underline the stupidity, I think, which is fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, kudos to whoever did Lady True's hairstyles and outfits for the whole season. So awesome.
One of the people I was watching with couldn't shut up about the hat that she was wearing at the end. Just I love that hat. I love that hat so much.
Yeah.
I don't want her to win, but I almost wanted her to win just because of the hat.
I want all her clothes, and I think her daughter is awesome. I'm so pleased the mother survived.
It's a bizarre twist that she's really her mother too, and I like that.
But it's beautiful because it carries on the trauma. However you try and stop or correct for trauma with red fadations, whatever, the trauma keeps on. You keep creating trauma, and that's why, to a certain extent, Dr. Manhattan is right to be pessimistic. But I also think Will Reeves at the end is right to say, for someone who could have done so much, he could have done more, because it's not okay to say humanity will never change. Of course, humanity will never change. That doesn't mean you shouldn't quite keep fighting for the better angels of our nature to win out. So I think it's just beautifully balanced, because you can almost take from that ending, whatever side you see, you can read out of it. But I think it's beautifully poised and balanced.
Yeah. Oh, one thing I did love, as you mentioned, Red Predations, is all the little verbal puns all through it, with the absolute best having to be the title of episode 8, A God Walks into a Bar.
I know.
That was brilliant.
All the titles and all the music was just really. I kept on thinking actually from that episode when he does the whole egg thing. I was thinking, I wonder if they'll ever use "I Am the Walrus," and then yes, closing credits.
they had to.
I was like, yes.
Yeah. I mean, the characters are all, like, it's interesting. Like, I mean, I think certainly, we're talking about Lady True. I think we did need a little more of her backstory than we got, and they think they originally intended to. They said they did, but then they realized that they had so many flashbacks towards the end of the season that by having more of her flashback, it would take even more away from the current story.
Which brings me to like my only criticism, which is, I mean, the normal order for TV is 10 episodes or 13, right?
Right.
And I just thought this could have done with a little bit more room to accommodate that kind of thing. And, a woman as smart as Adrian Veidt, if not smarter from that kind of background, I would have wanted to see how she got the power and stuff that she got. So,
yeah.
Any other big criticisms you guys had that we can try and rebut? Michael?
I mean, I don't. I mean, it's too bad, that Thomas isn't on to himself, but and also, I mean, he was less negative than I am.
Right.
Again, like focusing so much on the themes, like I don't really have that much to say or that much to criticize. I am much more just generally a plot and a character. And I definitely had issues with both of those. I had issues with, like the very comic booky stuff, like what exactly is Dr. Manhattan? Like,
yep.
To what extent does he have free will? And in what world, like then there's like the weird, whatever. Like I don't want to get bogged down and like complaining about time travel.
But maybe the character stuff is interesting.
Well,
though,
so like
I think
one
you're
thing,
right. Plot and time travel, I agree, can be very irritating, and I just try and ignore them. But...
Yeah,
right.
So like one thing we talked about briefly with character stuff was just like I really didn't like that that Laurie and Looking Glass both got at least sidelined for multiple episodes. That was both of those characters were characters that I enjoyed. Like I definitely like both of them more than Angela. And like these huge flashback episodes. This is one of Thomas's thing. All the flashback stuff killed for momentum. The fact that we got these characters just like dumped into what was the joke where all the Game of Thrones characters went whenever they
the Dragon Pit.
Is that right?
Where they met. Well, that's where they got all finally. Is that what you're
No. It was like I can't remember. It was some kind of joke about like, oh, they must be in such and such a place because that's where everybody who doesn't get talked about winds up going. Maybe I'm misremembering something. Oh, anyway.
In the boat rowing.
Yeah. But at any rate, like they just got sort of dropped into oblivion, and we were waiting for them to show back up. And then when they did show up, they didn't really have anything for them. They got
Looking Glass,
follow
Man, and Laurie. Definitely.
Yeah, like he didn't save Laurie. He just stood there for a while, and then they followed Adrian. Yeah, and then they give them like, oh, you can arrest Adrian, I guess. Was that a good reason for us to not just have you?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I would have been sad, but in some way, I think maybe I would have respected them more if they just, if the Seventh Cavalry had just killed Looking Glass and then Mrs. Miami Vice's wife, the cop.
Oh.
What, Judd Crawford's wife?
Crawford. Yeah, Crawford's wife. Crawford's wife had just killed Angela, or not Angela, but Laurie. Just like, but if they didn't have anything for them to do, then I guess like a sudden character death would have been at least interesting and would have been a reason why, for their character to just vanish, as opposed to like, oh yeah, and then they're also, I don't know.
Although
to me, that's back to plot as much character. But
I'm sorry. Yes, then, you're right. I always go back to in some ways, but.
One thought on that, which is on some level, though, doesn't that kind of mirror the original Watchmen? Because, I mean, what's his name, Night Owl and Laurie and Rorschach all go down to confront Veidt and basically don't do anything. I mean, he does his plot,
does Dr. Manhattan.
He saves the world, and none of them do anything.
Well, they lose. I don't know that they don't do anything. They lose, right? They don't just... Because if they
try to stop him, but he stops them in like 3 seconds.
Right, because he does, absolutely. Yeah.
He's just much smarter than them, basically.
Yeah.
Laurie's just a jump top. I mean, like, if you think of all those superheroes from back in the day, they were all just normal people.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Veidt was super brainy, and Manhattan was like a genuine, miraculous superhero.
And no one else has powers, really.
But look, I think, it was sad to me that Looking Glass got a bit shortchanged, because I think he's a phenomenal actor.
Right. I would really enjoy it. Yeah.
And you're right. I think that whole kind of there was a particular plot that obviously went away that meant they were left hanging. But a cynic might also say, I don't think this was done cynically, but it does leave open season 3 because then it pits, you know, Looking Glass and Laurie against Veidt, so that could be potentially interesting. But I understand what you mean about not like really getting into Angela Abar as a character of herself. Like, I found that peculiarly hard, and I think that in a sense she's a cipher. Like, quite literally, she becomes a cipher for Will Reeves' memory.
Right.
That said, that the 2 flashback episodes, so the flashback episode, the flashback where she sees what happened to her grandfather and relives his memories, all in black and white, to me was, I mean, number one, shot beautifully, but so profoundly moving. I mean, I was crying for a lot of that episode. So the idea that it stopped forward momentum, to me, made no difference, because it was enriching and creating all the profundity for the season.
I agree.
And
with
then
you.
and then the kind of the God walks into a bar, which has a lot of, well, kind of flashback forward, whatever you want to call it. What is time anyway? Again, that was when I really liked Angela, because she was being quite smart and quite Laurie-like.
Those are probably my 2 favorite episodes.
Yeah, hands down my favorite episode.
So I totally agree with the Will Reeves flashback episode. I mean, I think you can make the argument that it killed for momentum, but I think it was the best episode of the series probably, and was just an excellent standalone episode. You know, without needing to be as part of a series at all. It was just great, and I liked it a lot. I think that in some ways where I really diverged and where I really lost the thread was in the A Man Walks Into a Bar episode, because to me, like, you liked Angela in that. Like, Angela was, I found her very frustrating. It seemed like she was having the same, and maybe this is a plot thing, it seemed she was just having the same conversation with him over and over. It's like, you've been together 6 months, understand that he's not, that he's the future. Just like this constant, like, I found her very frustrating.
I was just going to say, that makes sense. I totally.
The fact that we're having this conversation where we're trying to grapple with, does he have free will? Where is he? What's he doing?
Right.
And I think that's,
I think I stopped saying it out loud after about 20 minutes.
Yeah. Well,
I don't think I keep saying it out loud.
When you're in love with them, that would be different.
Exactly. When you're dating the person, you're in love with them, and you're spending, how many hours a day with them. There's people, I have friends, little things about them annoy me, and we still talk about it. I still bring it up, even, after 5 years, we'll still make jokes about the quirks in each other that annoy us or astound us, or we find we just don't understand. I think that's very natural for a relationship and for people to do. So, and I think this is so far beyond our experience. Like, none of us can really understand this. I mean, again, we're all debating it still, that it makes sense that she'd be like, so wait, you really can't? That's just something I think you do.
And actually, to me, it's almost a more human, real, authentic kind of reaction to that than if you, like, we have 2 examples of women trying to cope with being in relationships with Dr. Manhattan, if not slightly 3 with the original fiance. And I think Laurie's also interesting, like, but the way it was done in the novels is, there's multiple hands pleasuring me, but he's really doing the science work with Veidt, and that pisses me off because he's mentally cheating on me, which I always found a bit trite and a bit kind of, like, that was a bit silly, whereas this is much more kind of like humdrum. But I don't know, maybe that's just, I have multiple conversations with my other half where I'm like, really? But this is, and he's like, I told you, but I just think that's how relationships work.
Yeah. No matter how much you're used to something, you're not really used to it, especially when it's such a foreign idea.
Yeah, exactly. And it's neat because it gives you the profundity of what she does, right? When she cracks that egg open. Maybe it's to be close to what she lost, but there's also, I don't know, to me it just makes it a bigger deal, because
I would have also liked to have, I didn't understand that either. From like a character, I would have liked more. I didn't understand that as from a motivational point. Like, I felt like that was a decision that Angela would have had to think harder about than just eating the egg at the end.
I think that's something maybe we should talk about, because I think that it is a tough decision to make. I mean, given how alien he was to her and all that time, but you got to figure after 10 years she had to get used to it to some extent. And
well, he wasn't alien for most of them.
If I just think it's as simple as this: if you love someone and you've just watched their soul being obliterated, and
just
there's this
take in whatever you can.
and this tiny bit of them is left.
I can see that.
And even if it's the bit of them that you found the most alien and the most hard to comprehend, wouldn't you do anything to just keep hold of that? To me, it would be like a no-brainer. And so real, so authentic. I mean, I've really struggled to like Angela, but I just found her like a bit of a hollow shell. But these last 2 episodes, I was 100% with it. And I think the love that the Dr. Manhattan Abar relationship, when he says, "This is when I fell in love with you, when you defended me anyway, even though you knew I was going to die."
Right.
To me, it was profoundly moving. Like, there's something about watching two people who love each other being separated and then just trying to grab onto whatever is left. Even if this is just a normal egg, my God, if there's a 0.001% chance I could have a bit of you with me, I'll take it. And grief does strange things to people.
Right.
And I don't think she was even thinking of the ramifications of, I don't think even in her own head she knows if the powers were real, what she will do with them. I think it's just more, I will have some part of this man that I loved back.
I mean, one thing that's strange, I don't want to go into this, but, so, yeah, never mind.
You can if you want. I mean,
well, I was just gonna. I mean, there's no reason to like pointlessly, endlessly examine Dr. Manhattan's powers. But I mean, like, she shouldn't have needed. I mean, I guess maybe she had to walk out to the right. I mean, if she really got all of Dr. Manhattan's powers, then she's Dr. Manhattan, and now she knows that she can walk on water. But I guess since you're Dr. Manhattan, you have to go and test it anyway because what you would have done is what you have to do. Blah 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 blah.
I mean, I guess that's such a little point, given that, I mean, you need to have a graphic representation of it, and I think that worked.
Of course.
You know, I mean, yeah, presumably if she really did get the powers, it would instantly flow into her, like, blah, you know, like an explosion of whatever. But, you know, I guess those little points I don't worry about so much. You know, I mean, some of the bigger points, you know, I mean, I think we've mentioned a couple times that maybe we should take a moment and talk about how the abandoned mind control plot, where, I mean, I feel like, you know, I mean, clearly they've even said the original idea was to have the 7th Cavalry all doing the mind plot thing, and then True was going to do the becoming Manhattan thing. And then they realized, wait, this would work well together. And on some level, yeah, you can see that plot line just sort of ends midway through the season. But I kind of like that idea because on some level, I mean, it makes sense to me that like a cabal of bad guys are like, they have a plan and they're working on it, and then they get defeated, and then they're like, well, what's our next plan? I mean, isn't that what happens in comics all the time?
Yeah.
You know, the Joker's gonna take over the city by turning everyone into laughing whatevers, and then, oh wait, he gets defeated, so this time he's gonna do this, you know?
Sure, yeah. My problem with switching horses or whatever is more just that, like, I think that it makes for like some not great television, right? To have sort of a Chekhov's gun that never really gets. I mean, except Kill Judd, which is unnecessary. And so like I don't think that's great television.
I think on the same level though, I think if the end point of that story is Judd gets killed, I think that works. You know, I mean, he gets taken out by their own weapon, and that's the end of that weapon. I mean, I kind of like that.
But why is it?
Plus,
I mean,
the better idea.
But why is it the end of the weapon, right? Like, why isn't? I mean, like, you know.
Well, because they got a better one.
I mean, Will Reeves does not have a better one, right? Like, Will Reeves could have Lady True do whatever he wants. He could have, right? I mean, like, Will Reeves doesn't like Lady True. Will Reeves has an incredibly powerful weapon that never uses at all, and maybe he thinks immoral. I don't know. But you know, like, what is Will Reeves doing with that, and why is he making the? I don't know. Again, like, I'm more than willing to say, like, I get super sidetracked, especially these days, by plot stuff that doesn't make sense personally, and I think it's a weakness in me, and it keeps me throwing things that I might otherwise enjoy. But you know, that's just where I am.
Well, I mean, they're fair criticisms, but I think that. I mean, I don't think Watchmen has ever. The original Watchmen was, you know, every little plot point was relevant. I mean, some of them were, but in the end, I think it is the characters, the concepts, the ideas that are more important. I'm not saying. I mean, those are valid criticisms, but I don't think, for me, they don't overpower what they've done on TV, which is this is just brilliant, and I love these themes and I love the ideas. And the characters. Sure,
yeah. I mean, I'm in no way, saying that in some sort of objective way. They overpower those things. Just for me personally, it keeps me from being able to experience that when I keep bumping every 5 or 10 minutes on a thing that's like, well, that doesn't.
And one thing to go back on one thing Bina said is when it comes to Angela, the idea that you weren't really all in on this character until the end kind of makes sense to me too, because I mean, invariably, we can't know that character well because we don't know the most important thing happening in her life, which has to be, you know, that her husband was you know, Dr. Manhattan.
Absolutely, and she's a very closed off. Yeah.
Right. And as a result, and she would have to be closed off because she can't slip even once, or he could be dead.
Yeah.
You know, if she slips even for a moment,
dead.
Well,
she could lose him.
He could.
Well, I mean, but she
didn't.
But she didn't know that, right? She wasn't worried about him dying. She was just worried about losing, you know, that she had. But
their life.
Yeah, their life.
Not only that, but her life would be different because once it's revealed.
Of
you know,
course.
I mean, unless he was going to use mind control, then once the story's out, the story's out. You know, unlike in comics where, you know, Spider-Man's secret identity gets revealed, and then the whole world forgets it a week later.
Absolutely.
And then 2 years later, the writer goes, "Hey, let's do it again," and then they undo it again.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that makes sense that we then, once we find out what's really going on with Angela, we feel closer to her, and that makes more sense to me. That's I think was intended.
I think so. I mean, I think that she was to be kind of, you know, she was supposed to be someone who we didn't understand. I agree.
And the question is for you, like, did you like her better once you understood it? Like Bina did, I did.
I don't know that I felt any differently about her at all. I guess I didn't dislike Angela. I just didn't particularly. She wasn't the person that I mean, probably pretty low on the list, like in terms of other major characters. I mean, like you know, I think pretty much everyone more interesting than Angela was. Even Cal in some way. I guess Cal was pretty boring also, but
it was intended.
I mean, obviously intended to be.
Don't you think Dr. Manhattan's also boring? So that was a good.
Well, no, that's perfectly fair. Dr. Manhattan is also, yes, very boring. Dr. Manhattan is interesting for about the first 5 minutes you see him. Every time you see him, it's like it reopens like, oh yeah, what a weird person. And then after about 5 minutes, it's like, all right, I'm okay. Let's move on.
Sometimes I think with Dr. Manhattan, he's like the dragons of like comic books because
yes.
He's almost like too powerful in superhero terms. Like the fact that he's almost omniscient, and like it's kind of like this brings 100%. Up issues of fatalism. This brings up bigger issues than are suitable to be tackled in 9 hours of TV or in whatever how many issues of a comic book.
I agree very strongly.
And I kind of feel it's almost like Lindelof has taken it seriously because his approach to the original book has been so earnest. And in a sense, he's been hoisted by that and he's been boxed in by it. And I think a lot of the issues you have with it, Michael, are super valid because actually they really speak to this fundamental, not flaw with the original Watchmen, but it's problematic.
Yes,
it's really
so
problematic.
I do think, I mean, and I like probably one of the biggest, you know, if from my perspective, but one of the biggest mistakes was involving Dr. Manhattan in the ultimate plot of these villain groups, right? Like, I think they should have done everything they could to keep Dr. Manhattan out of the story or to neuter him in the same way that Adrian neutered him in the graphic novel. I think that you just can't talk about Dr. Manhattan. As soon as you start talking about Dr. Manhattan, or as soon as you start involving him in a major way, like the story does not make sense anymore. His power level is out of whack. His power is confusing and it doesn't make sense. And you just, from a story perspective,
that the whole point?
I think you have to stay away from him. You break your story.
I think on the opposite, I think one of the brilliant things about the original graphic novel is that he tackles that question. Because, I mean, realistically, why is Dr. Manhattan even in the Minutemen? I mean, there's nothing they tackled that he couldn't finish in 3 seconds, if that long, you know? And I think that's one of the things that Alan Moore was really talking about is how, you know, it's weird how we have all of these characters that are basically just, you know, Batman, just someone in a suit who did some training, and then suddenly you have someone way more powerful than man. I mean, remember this was originally taken from the Charlton superheroes, and you did have this character, Captain Atom, who's the same thing basically, and you know, he just doesn't belong in that world. You can't. I mean, that's the funny thing about, you know, we talk about Avengers and Justice League. There's no need for any of those minor characters to even be there realistically.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. I mean, the final battle with Thanos, I mean, really, you really think that any of those, you know, that Hawkeye can really do a damn thing about a horde of alien invaders? No, he can't, of course.
Of course,
but
yeah.
we got to do it because that's the genre. It makes no sense. And they made it work. They made it work. Same thing with Justice League. There's no point to Elongated Man. There's no point to Atom. There's no point to any of them. But you got to find a stupid plot way to fit them in. And I think this is, in both series, kind of that's what you're doing with Dr. Manhattan. You're saying, yeah, this is dumb, but we got to find a way to make it work. And he does live in this world. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I see what you're saying, and I do. I mean, obviously, I do like the original Watchmen, and I like the way that he was handled there as somebody who does live in the world and does affect the world. But I think that Alan Moore pretty carefully, crafted the story around that to keep him from his very strange powers that don't make any, or that are simply not comprehensible, right? Like whether they make sense, in some sort of whatever way, but they're not comprehensible, right? Like how he makes this is not comprehensible. And you don't want an important, powerful character who essentially makes sense that may as well be random, right? I mean, like, because we have no concept of how he's making his.
Or does he make decisions?
Or does he make them at all? Exactly, right? Well, I just meant from a story perspective, just. Right. Because you can have Dr. Manhattan do anything, right? And then just have him say afterwards, like, I don't know, that's what happened me to do. That's my decision.
Isn't that something they directly approach in here? I think that's the fundamental question does he take any action on? I mean, everything he's done has been, like he even goes into Vietnam because, he was told to do it.
Yeah, which I like. Yeah.
I think that's a great question to ask. And then, something Bina brought up, which is the question of, is this because of his history and who he was as a person, or is this just a fundamental, like, what would happen if you got these powers? We don't know, and I don't think they have the space in a 9-hour series to really tackle that, so they just touch on it and let you think about it if you choose to. I kind of like that.
And the weird thing is that presumably Lindelof, if he'd asked for 13 hours, like Wire style, would have been given it by HBO. So, I think that's a problem, really, because he should have gotten into that a little bit more. I have said all I need to say, and it's nearly 11 p.m. here, so I might dine off if that's okay.
Absolutely, yep. Thanks for letting me.
But it was really interesting to hear. You guys can carry on. I'm just glad that we maybe brought some love back to the end of this podcast. Cause...
of course, now this is going to end up being a 3-hour podcast now with all of us. But
of course, okay, cool. Anyway, have a good night, boys. Bye.
All right, see you later.
Got it. Oh, I don't know if there's anything else you want to say.
Yeah, there's nothing. I mean, I got to say my piece mostly yesterday. If there's anything else you want to talk about, I'm happy to. But
I actually listened to most of your recording, so I did hear most of it. I got about 3/4 of the way through. Okay. There was a point where one of you left.
Matt left. Yeah.
I stayed a little after that, and then I actually
we hardly talked about Watchmen at all. We talked about other HBO series and stuff like that.
Right, that's what I figured. I heard you starting to do that, and then actually it was like late/early. I'm a night owl. I just woke up for this a little while ago, so I fell asleep after I listened at about that point. So I went to bed. But that was an interesting discussion. I'm glad we got to be a little more positive here.
Yeah, and also to talk more about themes stuff like that and get away.
Because I think it is interesting how these themes will resonate differently for a group of white men. I mean, like I think.
Sure. I mean, that's
And I think it is interesting because, one thing I didn't mean to mention, maybe Bina can edit this in afterwards, is one thing I find really interesting too is how there's a subset of like white men right now who are just who are strangely enough in the nerdism field, people who are comic book, superhero, Star Trek, Doctor Who fans who are just bored, just not even bored. They're just out and out incel racists and sexists who are so upset about, the fact that we have women superheroes and that we have, people of color and a woman heading up Star Wars and a woman of color is the star of Star Trek, and how dare they? And they always played it off like the big thing they're upset about is that is that the new Captain America is black or that they're replacing the white men with a woman and whatever. Sure. But then when they do, they say come up with your own heroes, and then when they do Star Wars trilogy, the new Star Wars trilogy, you have basically. You have a Latino man, you have a woman, and you have a black man in charge, and then they still hate it and freak out about it and go nuts. So obviously that was never the issue. And I mean, I'd be curious. Well, it'll be interesting to see how much they freak out about the fact that both Hooded Justice and in fact Dr. Manhattan get turned into black men in this, they're probably really pissed off, and that a woman of color is in charge of it. In fact, I've read a little online, and they were already from the very first episode really, really pissed off that the racists were the bad guys.
Well, I mean, sure. I imagine that the racists are annoyed to always be cast as the villain.
Right. But you know what? Good.
Yeah.
And hopefully, Bina, I don't know if you're still listening when you're listening to this recording I'm going to send you, but I hope that you'll maybe throw that in somehow, because I like that, because that's an important point I wanted to make, actually. But in any case,
yeah, right on.
That wasn't directed. By the way, I know that came off after I was.
Oh, no.
That
You're totally fine. No worries. No problem.
But on a serious note, I think it does raise issues of, how do, themes of racism resonate, for white viewers. And I think that, I hear a lot, oh, we were hit over the head with it, or, oh, God, we're talking about racism again. And, and how often is it really dealt with in media? Very rarely,
Sure,
and yet,
yeah.
Whenever it's brought up, I hear from a lot of people and I don't think I think there's unconscious racism again of why do I have to deal with this issue again? Like, come on, I'm white, it doesn't bother me. And they don't say it that way. And I think we all have a little of that, I think all of us have a little of that in us, that, why are you taking away from my superhero story by making me think about racism? And you know what? Because black people have to deal with it every fucking day of the year.
Sure, yeah.
So God forbid we should take a couple of hours out of your time to explore these issues,
Yeah, and I mean, I do think, I mean, I've definitely watched things where I felt like the exploration of racism or sexism or anything did sort of take away from the story. I don't think Watchmen did that. I think it was very well integrated into the story. I think that everything fit, and I don't think Watchmen ever got I guess. I've definitely seen things where I did feel like, okay, now you're just lecturing me. But I don't think Watchmen ever descended to.
I mean, yeah, the Seventh Cavalry were kind of,
they were cartoon villains, absolutely. I mean, of course they were, but that's what they were supposed to be. I mean, I don't think there was a problem with that.
Right.
And I mean, I think mocking the Klan is definitely, I think somebody in the recording from yesterday, I think, mentioned that, or maybe it was in the chat, I don't remember, that some of the early Superman, either comics or radio or something, did a lot of mocking the Klan stuff. So I mean, I think that's definitely well within the tradition, and I mean, why wouldn't you want some slapstick sort of villain,
It was more often Hitler directly, during the war, and particularly the Japanese. They did that a lot. In fact, ironically, a lot of the making fun of the Japanese was actually
of course really, it was
really
racist. Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a certain irony that we're making fun of Hitler, but I don't think you had so
racializing the Germans in some way, right? Like the Hun and stuff like that, otherizing.
Right. In any case, on that cheery note,
yeah, no, it was a pleasure talking with you.
To talk to you, and hopefully we'll do it again soon.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. See you later.
How do you turn this shit off?